Hi everyone, I'm Tim Kington and this is Coding is for the Birds. There's a programming challenge every December called Advent of Code, and there's a problem released every day. Each problem has two parts. I thought it might be fun to try to work through some of these. We'll start with problem 1 and see how far we get. Here's the URL for our first problem. And the first part of this describes the stars. Basically, we're going to be able to win up to 2 stars each day. And we need 50 stars to save Christmas. The problem description itself actually starts here. So pause the video and take a look at this problem description. So we're in a submarine below the ocean. We get a report of depths starting from our ship. So going outward from the ship, we get a depth of 199, then 200, then 208, and so on. And what we need to do for this problem is figure out how often the depth is increasing. So we're going to go through this list of depths and count the number of times that a depth is higher than the previous depth. So here 200 is higher than 199, 208 is higher than 200, 210 is higher than 208. So those are increases. 200 is a decrease. Then we go back up to 207, so that's another increase. So if we count the 7 times that this increased, that would be the answer if this was our puzzle input. So we need to take our puzzle input and count how many times the number increases. Once you sign in, you should see this link to get your puzzle input. And so I will grab this, and we need to stick it into a file. I've also created an empty Java project. Add a file here called input.txt and put my puzzle input in there. And then we should be able to get started writing code. So we're basically going to need to read from that file a line at a time and check the depth at each line. So reading from a file, we're going to create a scanner. And we will, I forget what happens if we give it a string. Let's see if this will work. We're getting some errors. We need to import that scanner. Then we'll say, well, we've got more lines, read a line. And depth will be that line as an integer. As we run, we need to count increases. So let's create a variable for that. And we're also going to have to track the last depth. And we're going to check to see if each depth is higher than the previous one. We could add a special case for the max depth for the first one, for the first depth reading, because we're supposed to not compare that to the previous depth. But we could just have a previous depth that is big enough that it will never count as an increase. So I'm going to set the previous depth to max value. And then here we'll say if depth is greater than previous depth, count it, increase, add 1 to increases, and then here set previous depth to depth. And at the end, we can do an end.close, and we should print our increases out. That seems pretty straightforward. Let's see if it can find our input file. I'm not quite sure what VS Code will do when it comes to current directory. Okay, that's not the right thing to do with the scanner, huh? I think we need to maybe create a file object here, tell it we're trying to open a file. If I save this, there's probably a way to get these imports to happen automatically when I save the file, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We also can get some exceptions. We don't care about error handling in a little puzzle program like this, so we'll just let main explode if there's an exception. Okay, so it looks like that probably worked. We got an output, 1446. So let's see if it's the right answer. Hooray, a gold star. And whenever we finish the first part of one of these problems, it unlocks a second half that's a little more challenging. So let's take a look at this. So go ahead and pause the video and take a look at the second part. Now what we need to do is consider sums of a 3-measurement sliding window. So there was too much noise in the data when we're just looking at every depth measurement. What we really want to know is if the trend is upward. So we're going to add up the values for each of these 3 measurement sequences. So we'll take the first 3 values, which are marked A here, add them together, and that'll be the first value we consider. Then we take the next set of 3 and add them together, the ones marked B, and then we check if that sum is higher than the first sum of 3. For our third measurement, we will add these 3 together, compare that to the total of the B measurements, and so on. So we're going to add up each set of 3, and we will compare those sums to the previous sum. And then we need to count how many times that increases. Okay, so what's a nice way to do this? I think I'm going to do this with a list. So let's have a list of integers that is the previous depths. We'll make that an array list. And whenever we read a depth, we'll add it to our array list. And then we'll remove the first depth if the length is greater than 3. So if previous depths.size is greater than 3, then we're going to throw away the first measurement. Is this going to call the right remove? Because the remove, no, the hovering isn't working right now because the code doesn't compile, I think. We have no quick fixes available, really? Oh, that's not the right list. That's one of our problems. That's weird that it completed and imported an AWT list. That is not the right thing. If I look at this remove, it's calling the one that takes an int for the index. I wasn't sure if it would call that one or the one that takes an integer, where it's going to search for that value and actually remove it. Okay, so if we don't have 3, if we have more than 3 measurements, we'll remove the oldest one. Then we're going to compute our sum. So we'll say sum, we could loop, I guess. I guess we'll loop. Sum is 0, we'll say for in depth in previous depths. We're going to add that to sum. And we are going to have to track previous sum much the way we tracked previous depth last time. So previous sum is going to be integer.max value. Let's break this up a little bit. Okay, so we read a line, we get the depth and convert it. We're going to add it to our depths, delete one if we have too many. We're going to compute our sums. This probably isn't happy. Yeah, okay. We can call this something else, I guess. Previous depth. Also, I did sum plus equals sum, which was wrong. I want to add previous depth here. And then we're going to say something like if sum is greater than previous sum. And then here we'll update previous sum to be the current sum. So this is pretty good. Now the other thing we have to do is worry about the cases where we don't yet have 3 values. So we're not going to do any of this if we haven't yet got to the third measurement. So here I'm going to say if previous depths.size is less than 3, we'll continue and go on and just read the next line. So this will take us back. We'll get the next line, add it to the list, and go from there. So let's give that a shot. 1486. It's possible that's correct. Okay. Well, it's not often you write code and have it pass the test on the first try, but that worked out all right. So are there any interesting decisions here? We could have created 3 integer variables to keep track of the previous steps, and then our logic in here shifting the depths around and keeping track of the 3 most recent, trying to get rid of the oldest of the 4 would have been pretty ugly. I think choosing the list here is a good idea. If we actually cared about efficiency, this should be a linked list because removing at the front of an array list is not very efficient. So I guess this is slightly better, but with an array or a list that's only ever going to hold 3 values, it doesn't matter. I guess this previous depths.size check is kind of nice. If we don't have 3 measurements yet, we continue and go back and read the next one. Once we have 3, then we're going to actually do the sum calculation and compare it to our previous sum. And using integer max value here for previous sum let us avoid a special case. Otherwise, we would have had more logic here to check if we already had enough values. Well, that was a fun little problem. Let me know if you like these and we'll keep going. Maybe we'll work our way through all 50. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.